Joining us now is our panel, political analyst Joe Siracusa and senior editor-at-large of Newsweek, Josh Hammer. Thank you both for joining us. Let's start with Iran. Tensions between the US and Iran are escalating. Overnight, the US shot down an Iranian drone targeting the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. Iranian officials are now warning that they might pull out of negotiations with US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner that had been scheduled to take place in Turkey on Friday. Joe Siracusa, can I get your analysis of what is happening at the moment and the direction that this is going?
Good morning, and I guess it's good evening, Josh, where you are in South Florida. Look, we have been at war with Iran since 1979, okay? And we've been going at it, and we've threatened them, and we've used we're using today, what they call, Tom Schelling called compellence diplomacy, later refined to coercive diplomacy, where we're trying to get them to do what we want them to do, and that is stop killing their own people, stop enriching uranium, and that kind of thing. And of course, they're going to hit back. Now, look, Iran is sort of a paper tiger in one way. I mean, I don't think they can resist combined American and Israeli airplanes and stuff like that. But it's as big as the size of Europe, almost twice the size of Texas. It's got 92 million people. And I know in my long career of observing and writing books and watching, Trump's my 14th president, you can't really win any of these wars. I mean, you can't go to war unless you have foot soldiers. I mean, you actually have to go in. That's what prevented George H.W. Bush the first time going in Iraq. He said he didn't want to direct traffic in downtown Baghdad. And so, we're trying to get them to do the right thing. And of course, Trump has promised them a little bit of help, the dissidents a little bit of help. And look, we all know the bravery of the Persians. The Persians didn't fall out of the trees yesterday. These people have thousands of years of history and pride and all the rest of it. And I'm sure there are many people there who are disgusted with the mullahs, the economy, and the rest of it. But if we start invading a place and putting foreign boots on foreign soils, we're going to create a few more enemies here than we want, because people get very testy about their land.
And Josh, do you agree with that? I know Trump has repeatedly warned that Iran risks being attacked if it doesn't do a deal to give up its nuclear program. But at the moment, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, so I broadly agree with what we just heard from Joe. Look, my own personal style of foreign policy is I'm not a huge fan of, let's call it, red line foreign policy. My own personal style and my preference would be that you kind of follow Teddy Roosevelt back in the day insofar as you speak softly and carry a big stick. Alexander Hamilton wrote in the Federalist number 70, one of our great essays on behalf of the Constitution's ratification. Back in the 1780s, Alexander Hamilton famously wrote that in the executive, in the single man executive, there is secrecy and dispatch. So that's kind of more style, is more secrecy, dispatch, more deliberations, and ultimately coming to a conclusion, as opposed to this red line stuff. But Donald Trump did draw a red line, Gabriella, to your point, and he was very, very clear about this. He put on Truth Social about a week into the protest there in the first week of January. He said, look, if the regime starts massacring its own people, then we are going to take action. And then about 2 weeks later, he said that the Iranian people, go ahead and take the streets, go ahead and try to retake your institutions. Help is on the way. I mean, this is about as clear a red line as you can possibly get. And this red line has not merely been crossed. It has been utterly trampled over. It has been utterly eviscerated. We don't even know the exact number of Iranians who have been slaughtered. It's virtually impossible to say. Right now, I think a conservative estimate, would be somewhere between 25 and 40,000. I'm seeing some numbers potentially as high as 80 to 100,000. We just don't know. But it's a shockingly high number. It's one of the worst massacres of regime on its own people in our entire lifetime. And again, to me, at this point, the repercussions of not doing something are likely going to be even worse than whatever the repercussions would be of actually doing something there. It's not just that Donald Trump has made this red line threat, Gabriella. He has taken his armada and he has taken it to the Middle East. This whole infrastructure is there. I think backing down would be really catastrophic at this point.
All those people killed and not one celebrity mentioned Iran at the Grammys. Let's talk about the newly released Epstein files. We know that former US President Bill Clinton and his wife, former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, have now caved, agreeing to testify in the congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. This comes days before the Republican-led US House of Reps was expected to vote to hold both Clintons in criminal contempt over their resistance of legal summonses. Now, several pictures of Bill Clinton appeared in the files released by the DOJ. Of course, we have to say Bill Clinton has denied any wrongdoing. Joe, can I get your thoughts around this? I think there needs to be more than a congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, but what do you make of this development?
I mean, it's very interesting. Look, uh, Bill Clinton is a sleaze bag. He's been sleazy, when he was governor of Arkansas and then president, and everybody heard rumors, and then he got caught and all the rest of it. I mean, he brought the office of the presidency into disrepute. I don't think there's any more mileage in embarrassing this guy. I mean, when he's being questioned under a subpoena and all the rest of it, he's got to tell the truth or his version of the truth. I mean, he's trying to avoid the contempt charge. And Hillary, I think her time is come and gone. That is, there's no more political mileage in getting embarrassing her. She's already had kind of an embarrassing end to her career anyway. But what bothers me about the Epstein thing is what looks like normalcy. It's got all these captains of industry and politicians and royalty hanging out with Epstein, and some lawyers who should have known better, as a matter of fact. And he's starting to give the impression that what he's doing is all right. Well, it's not all right. I mean, I was very suspicious when he got off the hook the first time, and the prosecutor who let him off the hook didn't really have a very good explanation, as a matter of fact. And so, there's a lot of things about Epstein that we're going to find out. Now, we got 3.5 million pieces of information. There are 2.5 million pieces to go. I'm amazed there's so many millions of pieces on this guy. And I don't think no one's going to find a smoking gun on President Trump. There's smoke, all right, but he knew the guy and he knew everybody who knew everybody else. But the Epstein thing is going to be investigated further because the American people, and these are good Republicans and good Democrats, who want to take this thing a little bit further. But I'll tell you, one thing that bothers me about this is that in his whole career, we have not heard a single story, email or anecdote about anybody who fronted Epstein's behavior and just punched him in the face. I grew up with a nice family on the south side of Chicago. I had a very polite Catholic father, a very polite Jewish mother, and that kind of behavior would never have been tolerated. Somebody would have punched someone in the face. The idea that no captain of industry stood up to this guy strikes me as devastating. The young lady who committed suicide in Australia, who wrote her memoirs, she said at the end she got very discouraged about anything coming out of the Epstein files because she said she realized after a while that everybody at the upper levels of American society regarded this behavior as normal. Well, there's nothing normal about what they were doing. And God knows what else he was doing besides corrupting these people. He's probably setting up people for blackmail, and he was wheeling and dealing. I mean, there's a lot of things there that people will be looking at hundreds of years after this conversation about how American society worked. But look, the whole thing stinks. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot more people are going to be caught up in this. And yes, there should be a full investigation. The American people will want to take this one to the end.
Yeah, we deserve the truth 100%. And there are still so many questions. Josh, can I get your assessment?
Yeah, look, I think everyone knows at this point that Bill Clinton was a heck of a lot closer to Jeffrey Epstein than Donald Trump was. For what's worth, Donald Trump actually kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. Jeffrey Epstein was actually a member of Mar-a-Lago. And as soon as Donald Trump actually learned of these deeply sordid deeds that Jeffrey Epstein was affiliated with, Trump actually kicked him out and took away his membership card. And frankly, Gabrielle, one of my working theories is that this is actually the reason that Jeffrey Epstein became something of an anti-Trump provocateur in his later years. We actually saw these text exchanges. He was texting the non-voting representative from the U.S. Virgin Islands during that Michael Cohen hearing in Congress back in 2019 there. He really had this deep-rooted anti-Trump animus, all these texts and emails with Michael Wolff as well. My working theory of the case is that Jeffrey Epstein was the kind of guy who basically knew everyone, that he was palling around, hobnobbing with the rich and famous. Donald Trump was one of the only people who, to Joe's point, kind of had anything in him to kind of stand up and say, no, I'm actually not going to be associated with this there. So that's my theory as to why Epstein was so anti-Trump, especially in his later years. Now, is anything going to happen from Bill and Hillary Clinton testifying? Probably not. They're probably going to take the Fifth Amendment over and over and over again there. I could actually potentially see a way in which Democrats tried to somehow make this actually redound to their interest. Maybe they try to ask questions, Bill Clinton, tell us about the GDP growth when you were president, try to kind of play up with the notion that the Democrats are very good at handling the economy there, this whole information operation about how Trump is overseeing an affordability crisis, which he's not. It's basically a fabrication of the media. Anyway, I'm kind of just spitballing here, but I could kind of see a way when Democrats could try to get some of their own applause lines for the cameras. Gabriella, personally, if I'm just being very candid and blunt here, I am somewhat frustrated with the Epstein story at this point. Not that I don't care about the truth. I care a lot about the truth. Rather, just putting on my legal cap as a lawyer who clerked on a federal appeals judge and I've seen God knows many criminal indictments and whatnot in my life here. I know that the statute of limitations for the overwhelming majority of the underlying crimes that were committed here have all but assuredly passed. So while we all want justice, just putting on my legal cap here, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I do not see some sort of meaningful legal justice happening. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that there's some statute that has not expired and that there's some kind of bigwig who can be carted off to prison, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 100 or a million, because this is really, really, really dark and nasty stuff there. But if I'm just being sober and I try to call it like I see it there, I don't necessarily see this ending with a huge amount of legal justice. Rather, I think the best that we can probably realistically hope for is political justice for those who have been involved in these sordid deeds.
Melinda Gates has broken her silence over some of the horrific allegations coming out of the files. In the newly released documents, there are allegations that Bill Gates was with Russian girls, he contracted STDs, and then was allegedly writing emails about how to secretly drug his ex-wife with medication so he could get away with it. Of course, Bill Gates denies this, but his ex-wife, Melinda Gates, has broken her silence. She says she wants answers about the allegations. This is what she had to say in a podcast with NPR.
Emails in the files suggest that Bill Gates had additional affairs and that he tried to get medication to treat a sexually transmitted infection, and that he was going to give you the medicine without you knowing. His representative has said all of this is false. It is not on you to have to respond to the details of that alleged behavior, but I wonder what your dominant emotion is when you read these news articles with these details.
Sad. Just unbelievable sadness. Unbelievable sadness, right? And again, I'm able to take my own sadness and look at those young girls and say, my God, how did that happen to those girls, right? And so for me, it's just sadness for, I left my marriage. I had to leave my marriage. I wanted to leave my marriage. I had to leave I felt I needed to eventually leave the foundation. So it's just sad.
Joe, can I get your reaction?
Oh, look, my apologies to the lady. It's really more information than we need to know. I mean, it's a very embarrassing type of revelation. It just reminds me of how stupid Bill Gates is. I mean, to risk his reputation and his married life over going to Neverland or whatever that place was. I mean, it's just crazy. Paul Samuelson, a great economist, his mother was a real hellraiser, and she said to a very rich guy one day, who said to her first, he said to her, if you're so smart, how come you're not rich? And she said, well, if you're so rich, how come you're so stupid? And when I see these people, these captains of industry, and pulling this kind of stuff and admitting to these kinds of things, I mean, I just wonder what the hell's going on in our minds when we put this guy and we elevate this guy. He gives a lot of money away. He's done a lot of good things, but at the end of the day, he's just kind of creepy.
I think that's an interesting point, Josh. And I was speaking to someone yesterday about the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And I think what shocks so many people is how stupid they are, that they've been okay with being photographed in these compromising positions. And Bill Gates, although he denies these emails suggest that he was planning on giving his wife medication secretly after getting an STD.
Well, I mean, this is why the Epstein saga has so many people who are asking questions as to what the heck was going on here, right? I mean, because how could so many people be so stupid? How could nobody blow the whistle for so long when it came to the horrific underage, sex trafficking rings and all the various other terrible things that were happening at Epstein Island? I mean, there's a million questions going on here. How the heck did Jeffrey Epstein get his money? How the heck did he get the Rolodex that he got there? How was he hobnobbing with heads of states? How was he? I mean, the guy knew everyone. He knew absolutely everyone there. So, I mean, it's kind of the perfect fodder for conspiracy theorists, right? I mean, you have basically everything imaginable. You have the heads of state, you have wealth, you have an island in the Caribbean, you have girls, you have this. I mean, you have everything imaginable that could kind of make the mind real. And here we are, and it's been roughly 2 decades, give or take, since a lot of this underlying conduct happened, and we really still don't have a whole lot of the answers there. And we've now seen millions and millions of emails, millions and millions of documents. The Trump administration, to their credit, they did not initially handle this the absolute best they could. I think that'd be a very polite way of saying it. Last summer was not their finest hour. I've said that over and over and over again. But they are now playing by the rules. Congress passed a statute force in their hand, and I think that people kind of deserve to know as much as they possibly can there. But again, Gabriella, if I'm just being very candid here, and I know that there are some folks on my side of the aisle who don't necessarily agree with this point. I personally am more focused on kind of the day-to-day issues that are affecting Americans in the here and present. I'm more focused personally on the cost of groceries, on the inflation price, on the southern border, on the ICE Border Patrol debate there. So I really hope that we can get some sort of resolution to to this Epstein story, and more transparency. I think will go a long way towards that. The Clinton testifying, hopefully, I think we'll try to heal a lot of wounds as well there. But ultimately, I really do hope that we can somehow find a way to move on to the issues that are really affecting Americans more tangibly on a day-to-day basis right now.
No, that's absolutely a fair point. I want to talk about what's happening overseas in Italy. Violent clashes have broken out during a large protest in Turin, Italy over the weekend as anarchists and leftists attacked police, prompting Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni to strongly condemn the unrest and vow a firm response. She said on X that violence against police and threats to the public order would not be tolerated. Joe, can I get your response, your assessment of what's unfolded in Italy?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting development, but look, Italy's always handled these things pretty well. People forget that when we had terrorism in Italy, the Red Brigade, the Italians beat these guys up, and they didn't have a major a terrorist or anarchist type attack in Italy for many, many decades. As a matter of fact, the Italians know how to respond to this, and all my people came from Sicily, which I'm sure provided a lot of terror, a lot of anarchists in the mix 150 years ago. But look, it just shows you that in Italy, which is run pretty well, by the way, by regions, federal government's never impressed me very much, is that there are some elements out of control. And we've seen this behavior skip oceans. In the 60s, we had 25 American cities burning, and now we're seeing cities or this kind of behavior elsewhere. And I hope it doesn't pick up on the United States, because we don't want to go through that again.
Yeah, Josh, it's interesting. We're looking at the vision now. It's pretty extraordinary. We'll just read you more of what Giorgia Meloni had to say. She said, "This morning I went to the hospital in Turin to bring on behalf of Italy my solidarity to 2 of the officers who were injured in yesterday's clashes," adding against them hammers, Molotov cocktails, nail-filled paper bombs and stones launched with catapults, blunt objects of every kind to prevent police from communicating. I mean, can I get your take?
Well, Gabrielle, putting on my cap as American, I guess my first take is it's somewhat reassuring, albeit in a bizarre sense, I guess somewhat reassuring to know that we're not the only country that deals with these kind of hooligans and malcontents. I mean, every so often it's nice to be reminded that the Antifa Black Lives Matter style anarchy that has really taken America by the vice grip for the past, better part of the past decade. Sometimes I feel like it's a uniquely American phenomenon, and videos like this kind of just remind us that this sentiment really is throughout the world, and especially throughout the world where there are right-of-center leaders in charge. George Maloney is the right-of-center leader in one of the And I mean, I'm not that Italy is a U.S. or China superpower, but they are part of the G7. Italy is historically one of the more powerful nations in Europe, at least as far as kind of the after Germany nations in Europe go. It's definitely kind of a second-tier power, if nothing else, on the world stage there. And she's pretty outspoken when it comes to a lot of major right of center issues there. She has been pretty outspoken when it comes to the migration crisis, when it comes to the fact that Italy cannot just be kind of a dumping ground of a lot of third world, especially Islamic world refugees there. She's taken a lot of kind of culturally edgy stances there. And this is how the anarchists, this is how the leftists react to this, right? Is they simply cannot abide people who are going to have a different opinion. They're not going to abide folks who are going to try to enforce immigration laws there, who are going to try to take an XYZ approach when it comes to the economy that they don't agree with there. There's really just no room for tolerance or civil disagreement when it comes to many folks on the left these days there. I hope that order is restored because Italy, again, it has been something of a success. I will note that in our own hemisphere here, in the Western hemisphere, we actually just had another election of a victorious right-winger in Costa Rica, actually, of all countries there, an inspiring 39-year-old free market candidate, pro-life candidate actually as well. So Costa Rica seemingly is now going the way of El Salvador in that particular part of the world, which is a potentially very interesting development. Javier Milei, of course, is kicking butt in Argentina. So we are seeing the rise of more of these right-of-center leaders in the mold of a Donald Trump, in the mold of a Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, Viktor Orban in Hungary, and now George Maloney in Italy as well there. But unfortunately, with strong conservative leadership, Gabriella, definitely comes a price as well.
Senior editor at large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer, and political analyst, Professor Joe Siracusa. Thank you both so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabriella.